There's been a lot of comments and discussion today about the Vietnam veterans, and we've invited Enoch Mac McLean, former Marine and MHD Semper Fi 1 member today, to say welcome home, Vietnam veterans. Mac?
Good afternoon. Distinguished guests, my fellow veterans, family members, and friends, I am indeed both humbled and honored to be here this afternoon. When I was first asked to speak, give my story about Vietnam, I initially said no, because every time I tell this story, it takes a piece of me. As I look out at this audience, any veteran here today could probably come up here and tell their story with a heartfelt eloquence. But today, and only today, you're stuck with me. If my entry into Marine Corps boot camp was my abrupt initiation into manhood, my entry into Vietnam enhanced me to grow as a human being. My initial assignment in Vietnam, I was a rifleman in Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment. We're in an area outside of Da Nang called Dog Patch. I'm sure some of you remember that area. On our daily patrols and combat ambushes, we lost people every single day, primarily initially by booby traps. As I observed Marines losing arms, legs, and their lives, it had a sobering effect on me as an 18-year-old kid. As Dorothy said in The Wizard of Oz, I was no longer in Kansas. This was real. This was not a war movie. This was war and all this raw, hideous reality. Anyone who says that they love war have never been in true, in-your-face combat. You've never witnessed the carnage and destruction that it brings. My first battle my major battle is something I will never forget. You see, it was the demarcation line that defined my life from that day forward. It was the first time I witnessed multiple injuries and deaths. It was the first time under fire that I would personally carry dead and wounded Marines to helicopters. Somehow on that day, as an 18-year-old kid, for some reason, I knew and I accepted that I was going to die that very day. Strangely enough, my only concern initially was that I wondered if my mother, who was very emotional, would be okay upon hearing of my death. And would she get the gifts I purchased for her in Okinawa? At one time during this chaos of battle, I began praying over and over. Please God, don't let me die. Please God, don't let me die. My mother only had 2 children, both sons, both Marines, both in the infantry. Both would go to Vietnam. My mother constantly wrote to tell me how she got down on her knees at night and prayed for the return of her sons. I know in my heart that my mother's prayers got my brother and me out of Vietnam alive. Although she is no longer with us, I wish I could say to her one more time, thank you. My brother, like so many other Vietnam veterans, never quite recovered from his experiences in Vietnam. He never assimilated back into society as we know it. There are people who say when they left Vietnam, The only thing they wanted to do was to forget Vietnam. I don't have a problem with this thinking or logic, because everyone deals with hardship, trauma, and pain differently. But for me, I don't want to forget. I want to remember every detail, every face, if not their name. I want to remember, so in my small way, I honor every person who was killed, either physically or emotionally, in Vietnam. I want to remember so that every name on that cold, black, granite Vietnam wall is never, never forgotten. You see, if we forget, it is like they never existed. It is like they died in vain. If they died in vain, this meant they died for nothing. And that is something I personally could not live with. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to forget. I refuse to forget. Vietnam was a very unpopular war. I didn't have some of the nasty experiences that some of my fellow vets had, being spit on, name calling. One vet told me of having a bucket of paint thrown on his uniform. Allow me to tell you, bear with me, of two incidents after leaving Vietnam that occurred to me. After departing from Vietnam, we went to Okinawa and we boarded a commercial flight with flight attendants to hold shot. We're headed back to the United States, or as we used to say in Vietnam, we were going back to the world. As we boarded the plane, we were told we could not get up. We had to sit down until the plane took off. Well, it was hot on the plane. We were in our full dress uniforms. One of the Marines asked the flight attendant, would she take his jacket? She reluctantly did so. Then another Marine asked her. By the time a third Marine asked her, you could tell she had nothing but utter contempt for us. It was obvious to us that she did not even want to be on that same plane with us. So finally what she did is, people were asking her, she walked to the storm, I should say, back to the rear of that plane and refused to come up there and service us. Again, it's something that I will never forget. Upon leaving Vietnam, I was hitchhiking, trying to get home on a lonely, dark road in Louisiana. I'm in full uniform with a sea bag carrying across my back. I'm hitchhiking for about 30 minutes, nobody will pick me up. Finally, I hear a car coming, they slow down a little bit. They pulled in front of me, stopped about 30, 40 feet. I could see there was a bunch of teenage kids in the car. One of them yelled, hey, you want to ride? And I go, sure. They goes, well, run, we're in a hurry. So as I started approaching the car, and I'm running with full sea bag, just glad to have a ride, they waited till I was right up on the bumper of their vehicle, stepped on the gas, and they sped away, laughing all the time. A laugh that I'll never forget. When he sped away, and he spewed dirt, gravel, trash, smoke all over me and my uniform. A uniform that I wore with pride then, and I wear with pride now. A uniform that was worn by Marines that I seen die. But again, as simple as it may sound, it was something that I never forgot. Like other Vietnam vets, when I arrived home, there was no one waving American flags to welcome me home. There was no praise along patriotic, decorated city streets. There was no handshake or warm, enthusiastic greeting. I think for most of us, not being given a welcome home somehow made us stronger. Most of us, rather than whining and becoming bitter with our country that we loved over our treatment, we decided to do something about it. We decided if we couldn't get the recognition and welcome home from others, then we would simply give it to each other. Consequently, when the